Hotel World. Once again, this your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, I want you to remember this. May your name live on forever. And may your memory never die. Hotel, cheers to that. The Bible that you never knew existed. What am I talking about? The majority of us, we grew up on the King James Version of the Bible. So I felt like it would be proper to begin there. The majority of us grew up reading the King James Version of the Bible and having the King James Version of the Bible read to us in church. Me, myself, being the son of a pastor, I definitely fit into this category. Well, did you know that the King James Version of the Bible came out in 1611? Okay, it came out in 1611. Now, when the King James Version of the Bible came out in 1611, it contained the Old Testament, the New Testament, and also the Apocrypha. The Old Testament, the New Testament, and also the Apocrypha. Now, before people jump out the window and start trying to debate me and argue with me, be careful. Be careful before you challenge me, and listen to what I'm saying and understand my train of thought. Okay? Please don't jump out the window. Now, it is generally accepted that the Apocrypha was not put on the same status as the Old and New Testament. That's not my point here. I'm going to go deeper as the video progresses. But if you have a King James Version of the Bible, right, which I grew up with and which was in my church as I grew up, if you have a King James Version of the Bible and it only has the Old and the New Testament and it does not also have the Apocrypha, then guess what? You really do not have the King James Version of the Bible. A light bulb ought to immediately go off. Immediately it should go off. And you should say, wait a minute. When the King James Version of the Bible came out in 1611, it had the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Apocrypha. But the King James Version of the Bible that I have right now, it has the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it does not contain the Apocrypha. For one, this is not the King James Version of the Bible. For two, someone changed the King James Version of the Bible. When did this happen? It happened in the 1800s. Okay? It happened around 200 plus years after the original King James Version of the Bible came out. Someone decided to take the Apocrypha out. Now, what is the Apocrypha? The Apocrypha is a group of books, okay, that was circulated and included with the Old Testament and the New Testament in various canons. What is a canon? A list of books. And we're talking about a list of books that are included in the Bible. So the Apocrypha is extra books that were written by ancient Hebrews, the Jewish people, whether they were living in Israel, whether they were living in Egypt, whether they were living in Greece, whether they were living in Rome, wherever they were living at. This was written literature about or by the same people who is purported to have written the Bible. Right? So imagine what I'm telling you. You look into the Old Testament and you have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Okay? I was raised a Christian. I know these books. So those are the books of the Old Testament. What you have in the Bible is you have a collection of books put together. That collection of books was decided to put together by somebody. The original writers, right, did not put those books together. Later people came, saw these texts and decided to put these texts in a collected book form and present it to you. Even when you get to the New Testament, what is the New Testament? It is a group of books, or more specifically, a group of letters. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, the letter to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. You know, I could go down the list, but what I'm saying is, even the New Testament, there were various letters. I wrote a letter to somebody. Somebody else wrote a letter to somebody. Somebody else wrote a letter to somebody. At a later date, someone collected these letters and put them together in what we know as the New Testament today. But what you have to understand is, back in the ancient world, before these books were placed together, they were just random books that stood on their own. And in this group where you had Genesis, you had Exodus, you had 1st, 2nd Kings, you had Chronicles, you had Nehemiah, Esther, you had Ruth, you had Haggai, Obadiah, you had Malachi, right? Later on, after the New Testament was written, you had Matthew, you had Mark, right? You had Galatians, you had Philippians, you had Timothy, you had Titus, okay? You also had books that are now deemed to be apocryphal books. And I'm going to read you a list of some of the names of these apocryphal books in case you never heard of them, in case you don't know what they are. Okay, you had, let me see, and I could rattle off a few off the top of my head, but I wanna get a specific list. Okay, now there were so many books that sometimes the list of apocryphal books are going to be different based on the men who came together and decided to say that, okay, these are the groups, or these are the books of the apocrypha that we are going to read. Okay, some of the apocryphal books, and you can research these books later. You had Tobit, Judith, Esther, more additions to the book of Esther that we have right now. You had the Wisdom of Solomon, you had Ecclesiasticus, you had Baruch, you had the letter of Jeremiah, you had more writings that are purported to, are supposed to be included with the book of Daniel. You had 1st and 2nd Maccabees, 3rd and 4th Maccabees. You had 1st Esdras, 2nd Esdras, 3rd Esdras, and Esdras is the Greek word for Ezra. You have Ezra in the Bible. These are more books of Ezra, but they call them Esdras because it's the Greek version of it. You had the Prayer of Manasseh, and you had Psalms 151. Now, you do have more books that can be considered apocryphal books, but I just wanted to paint that picture for you. We can start off with the Bible that you did not know existed, right? The Bible that you did not know existed was, for one, the original King James Version of the Bible that came out in 1611. They had the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Apocrypha. Someone decided to take those out. Just like someone decided to add those books in. So what you have to understand is, when you're dealing with a Bible is a collection of books. This is the first thing that you have to wrap your mind around. The Bible is a collection of books. I know it's hard for individuals that believe in the Bible. Directly, you know, Muslims, Christian, well, Muslims will tell you some of this, but Christians, right, and people who consider themselves to be Hebrews, or anybody who actually believes in the Bible. Now, what an individual is going to say is that they have the Bible, okay, and that they have the books of the Bible, and they're going to be referring to the Old and New Testament because they were raised on the King James Version of the Bible. But the first thing that I want you to understand is what you have is a group of books that someone else decided to put together and give to you as the Bible. Because if you were born in 1611 and you came across a copy of the Bible, your mentality would be that the Bible was the Old, New Testament, and the Apocrypha. That would be your mentality. But since you live in an area after the 1800s when someone had already taken the Apocrypha out, then when you talk to me about a Bible, you are going to be talking to me about only the Old and New Testament. And you may have never even heard about the Apocrypha. Okay? So let's get that established. The books that you have are the books that someone chose to give you. The books that you have are the books that someone chose to give you. Okay, even when you talk about the New Testament, individuals will like to say, yeah, well, there were a lot of books floating around. I'm going to show you some of those books. Okay, I can go into it a little deeper, but I just want to show you a few of them. I know it's backwards because, you know, it's how the camera records when it's facing you. But the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. This says the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. There was also a Gospel of Mary Magdalene out there. The Gospel of Judas. There was a Gospel of Judas out there. There was a Gospel of Thomas out there. There was a Gospel of Bartholomew out there. Right? There were more Gospels other than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In the same way, you have about 14 letters of Paul included in the New Testament. There were more letters floating around at that time. Okay? And someone decided to put the books in there that you know as the New Testament today. But when you really think about it, family, if a regular man, okay, if a regular man made the decision to include certain books and exclude certain books, then what you actually have is somebody's idea of the doctrine that you should have received. Because a lot of these books have contradictory messages in them. So someone wanted to say, okay, this is the real doctrine according to them, so we are going to put this book in. Okay, I have another book that I want to show you real quick, and I'm finna really go into this, and I'm gonna break this down, but I'm really just trying to show you that it is a lot more books out there than you may be aware of. This book is called The Lost Books of the Bible. Okay, Lost Books of the Bible. Now, some of the books that are in here were floating around during the same time that those letters that you find in the New Testament was floating around. You have one called Mary, one called First and Second Infancy, one called Christ and Abagoras, one called Nicodemus, one called the Apostles' Creed, one called Paul and Seneca, Paul and Thecla, First and Second Clement, Barnabas, Ephesians, Magnatius, Philadelphians, Smyrnians, Polycarp, okay, the Lost Gospel according to Peter, letters of Herod and Pilate, right? So when you look back in history, what you had was a lot of individuals writing a lot of books, okay, even with the New Testament, but also with the Old Testament as well. If you do a little research, and anybody that has read the Bible and you look inside of the Bible, you will see references to books that aren't there. It's a book mentioned in the Old Testament that you have, where it says, when it's talking about the story of Joshua, right, going to war and him praying to God and the sun and the moon standing still for an entire day, the Bible says that you have, the Old Testament version of the Bible that you have, it says that and these things are recorded in the book of Jasher, right? But when you look inside of your Bible, you don't have a book of Jasher. So obviously there was a book of Jasher in existence that this author was referring to, but you don't have it. Who made the decision at a later date to leave Jasher out if the people inside of the Bible were mentioning it and saying that it held records that they are attesting to, that they read it in the book of Jasher, and they're saying that these things are recorded in the book of Jasher, the same thing that I'm telling you now. So the book of Jasher had to precede the book that you're reading because it was already there documenting this event. And this is where they got that information from. It's some books you can read about in the first 5 books of the Bible, and it say that these things are recorded in the book of the wars of the Lord. Have you ever read the book of the wars of the Lord? No, you've never seen it. But the individual that's writing it, they had it, they saw it, and they're saying that their ancestors wrote it, and they're referring to it to tell the story that you have today. So even with the Old Testament, okay, even with the Old Testament, those people did not have the collection of books that you have, and we're looking at it as the authoritative copy. There were multiple texts, multiple books that individuals had, just like it may have been all of these books, right? And then if somebody comes later on and takes all of these books and puts them all together in one big book and says, okay, this is the story that I want you to read. But it's a man who has to come along and say, you know what? Let's put in the Epic of Yeshua. Let's put in Thicker Than Water. No. Let's leave out Dan Brown. Let's leave out Ancient African Civilizations. Let's put in Berossa's Emanetho. Let's put in the Book of Jasher. You know, we're talking about the Book of Jasher. I got that too. The Book of Jasher. Now, they are going to have their reasons for saying that my Book of Jasher isn't authentic. It's not the one that they were referring to in the Old Testament. But I would have to ask them, do you have the original Book of Jasher to compare it to tell me that this version is incorrect? And they're going to say, no, they don't have it. They don't have it. They don't know what it said. But all they know is the copy that I got, or the copy that you have, or the copy that's floating around. That's not it. That's a nonsense book. But according to who? Right? According to who? Okay? And now I want to slow it down. I just wanted to throw all that stuff out there to kind of like get your juices flowing, get your mind flowing. I want you to be like, what? The King James Version of the Bible that I have is not the version of the King James Bible that came out in 1611. No, it's not. The original had the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Apocrypha. If yours don't have that, I'm sorry. You don't have the King James Version of the Bible. Okay? Now, what I want to talk about next is, even when you talk about the Old Testament, right? Have you ever noticed that individuals will tell you that the first 5 books were written by Moses? This is what they say. But when you read it, it'll say, and then Moses did this, and Moses did that. Moses said this, Moses said that. Not, I did this, I said that, I wrote this, I went up on the mountain and talked to God. No, it says, and then Moses did it. It's written in third person as if somebody else is telling you what Moses did. And then even when you read in the actual text, it never tells you that Moses wrote these first 5 books. It tells you that Moses wrote the law. It tells you that Moses wrote the law. Now you can find the law within those first 5 books, but the stories that's around the law, right? Who wrote that? Where did these things come from? Okay? Nobody on planet Earth has an original version of these things. So you can't say, well, we have the original that Moses wrote. The only thing that they'll tell you is it's been copied. But the book itself doesn't even ever make the claim that Moses wrote those first 5 books. And when you read the book, it's written in the third person. Right? It's written in the third person. So now I want you to ask yourself, if, because I don't want nobody to just jump out the window and say I'm totally attacking their religion. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just talking. If Moses didn't write it, is there a possibility? Is there any tradition that says somebody else wrote it? And indeed, there is in one of those apocryphal books. It attests in 2nd Ezra that Ezra, the prophet, wrote the books that you actually have today. When the Israelites went into Babylonian captivity, the historical record found in 2nd Ezra, one of the apocryphal books, it says that all of the actual ancient texts and scrolls were burned and destroyed, so they were no longer available. So he had to rewrite these things from memory. And that would make sense based on how it's written. Because I can see somebody at a later date, somebody like Ezra, writing, and Moses said, and Moses did, and Moses went here, and Joshua went here. I can see him writing it like that in the third person, because he is telling the story, right? He is telling the story. But the interesting thing about what 2nd Ezra says is he not only says that these books were burned and that nobody had the law anymore, but when he talks about how he had to rewrite these things, he says he rewrote more books than the books that you have. Okay, so in 2nd Ezra chapter 14, right, you can read the story, but I'm going to go straight to verse 44 and get to the point. It says, so during the 40 days 94 books were written. And when the 40 days were ended, the Most High spoke to me, Ezra, saying, make public the 24 books that you wrote first, and let the worthy and the unworthy read them. But keep the 70 that were written last, in order to give them to the wise among your people. For in them is the spring of understanding, the fountain of wisdom, and the river of knowledge. And I did so. So what he's saying is all of their texts were destroyed when they went into Babylonian captivity. And when they were released from Babylonian captivity and went back to the land, the people did not have the law, and the law was not able to be read, so they did not know how to follow the law. Okay, so long story short, Ezra ends up, beseeching God, praying to God. He drink this special juice, goes on a fast, and God basically brings everything that was written back to his remembrance so he can write down what was lost in the texts that were burned. But he says something very specific. He says that when he writes these books, he writes 94 books. And he says that God tells him, the prophet Ezra, to release 24 of these books to the people, which later became the Old Testament. Now, you may be thinking, oh, the Old Testament has more than that. It has 30-something books. But mind you, the Bible has been manipulated so much. What we know as 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and all of that, those books weren't separated in the ancient world. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, that was all one book. Somebody decided to separate them into 4 books for whatever different reason. So a lot of times you'll find different numbers of books because people have been playing games with us. They have been in their own mind deciding what they want to do and what books they want to go in, and even how they want to separate these books. So Ezra says that God tells him to release 24 of the books to the people, which we know today as the Old Testament. These 24 books are indicative of the Old Testament. And he says the other 70 books, only give them to the wise people. Right? Only give them to the wise people. So right there you have an idea that there are 70 books. Right? There are 70 books that were important enough to be rewritten by Ezra, but they were only supposed to be kept, close to the bosom of the wise people and the men of understanding, and it was meant to be meant to edify them. And they were to know how to move and handle the people based on this secret information in these 70 books. While the Old Testament, the 24 books, was meant to be given to someone else, right? But even in that, that's very telling. That's very telling, because it says that these 24 books were given to the people. Even at that time, it wasn't consolidated into one particular book. Someone else came along later on and they did that. Now, I'm running out of time for this first video, and I'm talking real fast because I wanted to throw a lot of stuff out there, because I'm going to do a series on this. I just wanted to, whet your taste buds and get you prepared for this concept of the Bible that you never knew existed. I want to expose that to you guys, the Bible that you never knew existed, because information and knowledge is power, right? A lot of you do not know what has been hidden from you. You don't know about these other books. You don't know what these books say. So your conceptualization of Israel and the God of Israel and the history of Israel, it has been manipulated by the books and the stories that an individual has allowed you to read. Now, to my Christian friends, right? To my Christian friends, it's not an attack. I just want to share some information with you guys. Now, I want you to know that regular people decided what books would go into the New Testament. And you may be saying that, oh, no, what they did was they did the research and they only included the books that were legit. And those other books are spurious books, and they are of unknown origin, right? And they don't have the proper doctrine. That's why they left those books out. So I want you to follow your own mind state. What you're telling me is because whoever gave you the New Testament, because that group of people came together and decided that you don't need to read none of the other letters and none of the other books that were floating around, then somehow they were inspired by God to give you those books, and those books are the authoritative copy. Well, guess what? And I had to realize this and accept this for myself. Guess what? Those same people who eventually gave you those books in the New Testament, they said that a lot of those books that you have in the New Testament were spurious and of unknown origin and did not contain the real doctrine. There's a book that I have, and I'm going to be going into this in the series that I'm preparing for. This is a book called Eusebius, The History of the Church. Eusebius, The History of the Church. He's known as the father of church history. He is the first one who took the time to write a chronologically accurate history of the Christian church. Or more specifically, he was a Catholic, the Catholic church, but Catholics are Christians. Y'all all read the same book. It's all the same thing. Now, this was written in somewhere between 300 and 400 CE. Okay? So this was like 1700 years before right now. And I want to show you what he said about some of the books that you right now today think are authoritative books. And it is actually, they know where it comes from. They believe in it. And you may believe that they've been believing in these books ever since the beginning. But that's just not true. If you were born during his time, a lot of those books that you have in the New Testament right now, you would not have accepted. Just like if I say the book of Jasher, because you're not familiar with it and someone has already told you that it's irrelevant, you're going to say, oh, that's trash. Because I tell you about the Apocrypha and you live in a time period where somebody else has already decided for you that the Apocrypha is invalid, you're going to say, oh, the Apocrypha is trash. Oh, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is trash. Oh, the Gospel of Judas is trash. But you're only saying that because of the information that somebody gave you. So you need to get more information and we can make decisions for ourselves. But he has a section that's talking about writings accepted as sacred and those not. Okay? And I'm going to read it because I want to be unbiased. He says, those that are disputed, yet familiar to most. So he's saying the books that are disputed, that at his time, right? That at his time, over 1,700 years ago, the books that they were saying were trash, right? It's in the Bible right now today. You finna see it. The books that they were saying were trash, but were already in existence. They may say that, oh, these books are ancient. These books are old. Yeah, they ancient, they old, but they were saying that they were trash. And you standing on them right now today. So they are just as valid as the books that you are saying are trash today, right? Because everybody has a right to read and adhere to what they want to adhere to. So the books that were considered as trash to the early church that you have in your Bible today are, let's look at it. Those that are disputed yet familiar to most include the epistles known as James. Is James in your Bible? It was trash to the ancient world. Jude. Is Jude in your Bible? It was trash to the ancient world. And 2 Peter. Is 2 Peter in your Bible? It was trash to the ancient world. And those called 2nd and 3rd John. Is 2nd and 3rd John in your Bible? It was trash to the ancient world. The work either of the evangelist or of someone else with the same name. Among spurious books must be placed the Acts of Paul the Shepherd, the Revelation of Peter, and the alleged epistle of Barnabas. The teachings of the apostles, together with the revelation of John, if this seems the right place for it, as I said before, some rejected, others included among the recognized books. So even the book of Revelation that everybody like to quote, whenever it's wars and whenever it's, you know, things going like right now with the coronavirus, you know, right now with all the protests, everybody is telling us that, oh, this is Revelations playing out. Revelations is, we stand on Revelations. The mark of the beast, 666, we stand on Revelations. Guess what? In the ancient world, some people accepted Revelations. A lot of people saying it was trash. So it's all based on the time period and based on the individual that you got your information from. They were saying that this was trash. It's, you know, some of us were basing our life off the book of Revelation. Book of Revelations may be trash. man. But you won't know if you don't do like the research and really look into this and really see what's happening and really see what they're trying to tell us. The Bible that you never knew existed didn't even include it. Okay. Moreover, some have found a place in the list for the Gospel of Hebrews, a book which has a special appeal for the Hebrews who have accepted Christ. So James, Jude, 2 Peter, and those called 2nd and 3rd John, and the book of Revelations were all disputed in the ancient world. But we have them in our Bible today. Okay, so they are on the same level as all of these other books that individuals consider to be not valid today. See, I understand what's going on. I understand what's going on. You had people in the ancient world writing books, explaining God, explaining spirituality, explaining history. And they were just writing a lot of books. And people came behind them. They themselves didn't attach these books to one another. Somebody came behind them, not only rewrote this information, Ezra, not only rewrote this ancient information, but they sat down with groups of individuals and they was like, okay, these are the books that's going to go in. These are the books that we're going to take out. These are the books that we're going to put in. These are the books that we're going to say are no good. So what we're doing is we're taking the word of the individuals that made these decisions. And I have another book that I'm going to go into more detail with in this series. It's called Lost Scriptures, Books That Did Not Make It into the New Testament by Bart Ehrman, right? By Bart Ehrman. And what I'm going to show you in that book is I'm going to show you several different canons that evolved over the years. And if depending on what time period you was born in, we will be having a totally different discussion. Like somebody will get on here and they're going to debate me about the book that's in the Bible now and try to debate me about whether or not those books are accurate. But if I had a time machine and I took them back to 300 AD, right? If I took them back to 200 AD, if I took them back to 500 AD, they will be arguing a totally different point based on the information that somebody gave them. So what I'm saying is the Bible that you never knew existed. There are a lot of other books out there. And if you're not familiar with what those other books are, you cannot make a definitive conclusion about what books are valid and what books are not. Even if you talk about the Old Testament talks about books that you do not have. That you do not have. Right? So the Bible that you never knew existed, I'm going to be doing several parts on that. And I'm going to be breaking down these books, what these books teach, who took them out, when they took them out, and why. And as I wrap it up, I want to go back to what I said in the very beginning. Listen and just pay attention to what I'm telling you. If you have a King James version of the Bible in your house right now, and it only has the Old and the New Testament, and it does not have the Apocrypha attached to it, you do not have the King James version of the Bible. You are a victim of exactly what I'm talking about. Somebody in the 1800s decided to manipulate what King James did, took it out, left his name on it, and now you're saying that this is the King James version of the Bible. And if you showed it to King James, he'll say, where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it? And if I took you all the way back to 300, you know what I mean? You'll be saying, well, where's the rest? You know, where's the rest of it? Where's Peter? Where's 2 Peter? Where's 2nd, 3rd John? Where's Jude? Where's Revelation? And they'll say, oh, man, them books trash. What are you talking about? Why you want to read them? They trash. And if I took you all the way back to the time of Ezra, you'll be saying, oh, this is the Holy Tanakh. This is the Old Testament. All alone, they got 70 other books that's stashed away in the corner. And you don't know nothing about those books. So it's always books that have been hidden from you. And all of these books were never even connected, and they weren't even meant to be connected. And some of the books that you have that appear to be 4 books were really one book, and they were consolidated into one. And somebody came along and decided to separate them in the 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Who did that and why? That's what I want to be talking about. So the Bible that you never knew existed, I'm going to be going into that. Be looking for it. Leave your comments. I'm more than willing to talk about this. But don't try to aggressively attack me as if I'm attacking your Bible, as if I'm attacking your faith, as if I'm attacking your religion. It's not what I'm doing. I'm the bookworm. I talk about books. So this is a hot book. And I just want to explain how this book came to be and how it was formed and how it came to be sitting in your living room. And so maybe when you have all of the information, you can make a more informed decision about how you feel about it. That's what I did. This your brother, Matthew Daniels, a.k.a. Ampu, a.k.a. The Chosen Few, a.k.a. The Real Bookworm. I think y'all getting it now. I'm not a bookworm. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Shameless plug. Y'all go out there, support what I got going on. Support the brother Matthew Daniels, Thicker Than Water, hot novel, my second novel. Go get my book, Suicide Note. You can get it for $19.99 on Amazon. You can get the Kindle version for $2.99 on Amazon, $2.99. Show your support. Even if you're going to read it 3 months later, go get that. $2.99 for Thicker Than Water ebook, $2.99 for Suicide Note ebook. You can go get it. I also have a special going on. If you buy the book directly from me and you don't go to Amazon, go to my Facebook page, Everything Matthew Daniels. Go to the shop section. You can buy the book for $10. As soon as you buy it, I'm shipping it out. As soon as you buy it, I'm shipping it out. Support what I got going on. Thicker Than Water, Suicide Note. May your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotep, I'm out. Peace.